This is a story about trust, maybe the most important thing underlying the markets. Last December, we told you about major problems facing the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the body that publishes those all-important jobs numbers each month. Those problems got much worse when Donald Trump fired the agency's head last month. Our colleague Molly Smith reports on what it could mean for the system and for private businesses looking to get a foot in the door.
In a shared office space in downtown Manhattan, a group of economists see an opportunity.
As you can see, the BLS revisions are quite large.
You might not have heard of Revelio Labs, but they know an awful lot about the U.S. economy. Ben Zweig is the company's CEO.
We're a workforce data company, so we collect data from the public web, so anything that's online. And that could be public professional profiles, online job postings. We gather that data, we curate it, we standardize it, we enrich it, and then we ultimately sell that data.
Revelio's main audience is hedge funds and private firms looking for another perspective on the economy, beyond what's offered by government agencies. But things changed after an ugly July jobs report.
We got a very disappointing number here, and this is going to get Wall Street's attention. 73,000 jobs created.
President Donald Trump claimed, without evidence, that the numbers were biased and ousted the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election, and there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her. Right. And you know what? I did the right thing. We need people that we can trust.
We were really, really shocked when this happened. This happened on Jobs Friday, of course. And then over the weekend, I remember making some calls. I called our chief economist and a few other people on the team, and we were all kind of thinking the same thing. We were like, all right, we gotta publish macro statistics. There's some concern that the BLS may become politicized, either institutionally or just through the incentives they face. Maybe there's some concern that whoever leads it gets the message that if the numbers don't match a certain narrative, they might be out of a job. So there are some distorted incentives, and there's some concern that this data might not be trusted in the way that it has been, and it's time for us to step up.
There's nothing to report that says that there's been actual political interference. Now, I know there was a charge, and that was the reason for the firing, that the data for the revisions were politically manipulated. And that is absolutely 100% untrue.
Mike Horrigan is president of the Upjohn Institute, a think tank focused on labor markets. He also spent over 30 years at the BLS, at one point leading the Employment Statistics Division.
I've served under many commissioners, whether they be nominated by a Republican president or a Democratic president. I got to say, all of my experience as well as at the Bureau was that of collaboration, collegiality, understanding. I personally think all the business leaders I talk to still have trust in it. I think what they're looking for is whether or not a new commissioner is going to come in and interfere with that trust. I think that's the next big test.
After ousting Erica McIntyre, President Trump tapped E.J. Antoni to head up the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Antoni is the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, and was a contributor to the controversial Project 2025 plan. He faces Senate confirmation before he can step into the new role at BLS. We spoke with former Commissioner Bill Beach about the politics of the role. Beach served under both President Trump and Biden.
Whether the president's Republican or Democrat, they're going to find someone who has maybe demonstrated, or at least could demonstrate, that they support the general drift of the policy portfolio the president has laid out. So EJ definitely qualifies on that.
So E.J. Antoni has been pretty vocal about his critiques of BLS, including the jobs data, the revisions. He suggested before he was named to the role that the BLS should suspend the monthly jobs report until the data issues are, quote, corrected. Do you think that that's a viable solution for a problem that BLS is facing?
It's not viable at all. The monthly reports coming out of BLS, particularly the jobs report, are watched by financial movers and shakers all over the world, by policy people all over the world. Their biggest impact is here in this country, and I can't imagine a situation more deleterious to the economy that a statistical agency could do than to suspend or stop or delay one of their reports. I mean, it would cause a lot of problems. So no, it's not viable. And I think EJ will quickly see that if he's confirmed.
One report suggests Antony has since backed off from the idea of suspending the monthly jobs report. But regardless of whether Trump's new BLS chief makes the agency better or worse, the issue remains that there's room for improvement. The agency's problems are twofold: the budget needed to get the numbers right, and the people to make sense of those numbers. Its resources haven't kept up with the scope of the challenge it faces. Adjusted for inflation, BLS funding has slumped about 20% since 2010, and President Trump's fiscal 2026 budget proposal would shave off an additional 8%. But Horrigan says that the BLS has already been making the most of its tight budget.
The Bureau gets about 58% of their reports now from this thing called EDI. So, for example, with Internet, where it's more like, say, a single firm or a smaller firm will go into the Internet or the web data collection facility and enter their answers into that format, that's probably about 20 to 25% of the sample. There are other forms in which the data are collected. So, for example, CADI is a computer-assisted telephone interview. So a lot of these innovations were introduced well before I came on board, but over its history, those different innovative data collection techniques have been increasing over time.
Changes in the BLS's methods of collecting data wouldn't be without precedent. Its statistical peer, the Census Bureau, is already working with private partners to get creative in its data collection.
In terms of that next step, I mean, that's really kind of a function of resources. Census Bureau, for example, is doing some innovative research right now with Intel and Amazon to take a look at how you could use the firm's data in its own format and then use a large language model to basically fill out a survey form. That's the kind of innovative thinking that the Bureau and CES have done for years, and with more resources, they would be capable of doing that kind of innovation.
Innovation at the agency can also come through changing processes that no longer work as well as they once did. Nancy Potok was the chief statistician of the U.S. at the Office of Management and Budget and is currently CEO of NapX Consulting.
There's no question that we need improvement, we need investment, we need more research, and we need to update methodologies. The agencies have been starved of resources for a long time. I think a healthy discussion within the administration is a great thing. I'd love to see it. And I think it should involve people outside the system as well, the users. People who are really relying on the numbers to make decisions need to provide input into that, as well as methodologists.
I'm not telling the Bureau what to do, but they collect the data through the Friday before the release of the data on Employment Situation Day. So one option to consider is, if you want more reports coming in, before you introduce any additional innovation in terms of data collection techniques, maybe consider extending the time period for that first closing.
But processes and innovative partnerships need people to shepherd them, people it's been losing. The agency has roughly 2,000 employees, and a third of its top positions are now vacant.
One of the concerns I have is, even if you throw more resources at a time when we've lost so many talented members of the statistical community because of the fork in the road, because of firing all the folks that have less than 2 years of tenure, and all the senior executives that have decided to retire, you've got a people problem.
It's just amazing looking at the magnitude here. These are the green ones, again, BLS, and the blue ones are yours.
Pretty much what you get the first time is going to be very close to what you get a month later and a month after that.
The private sector thinks it can lend a hand to solve the government's data problem.
An idea that's come up in the context of improving federal statistics is this idea of blended data. So incorporating private or alternative data sources on top of what the government collects. Is that something that you have explored with BLS or other statistical agencies, or something you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to do that. It hasn't come up. No one has asked us if we'd like to.
Would you ask them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they know about us. We're very much in the same circles. It's a small world of labor economists, and we all know each other. And I think, certainly within financial markets, we're well known as the kind of go-to source for labor market information. So I think they know that we're doing this. My sense, and granted, I'm not in the room when these discussions happen, is that the BLS has not been able to justify funding for these new initiatives. And they've had their funding cut again and again, and this is something like a wish that has never really, gotten traction. So, not holding my breath for it, and I'd love if it would happen. In the meantime, we're just going to put it out there as a public service.
The science of statistics is empirical, but under the hard data lies the immeasurable but important quality of trust in those numbers and in the entities responsible for collecting and reporting them.
This is not a trivial matter. The trust in BLS is connected to trust in their product. The two are the same. And if you don't trust the product, then, for example, you're making a big merger with another company and you use data from BLS, and it has to be pretty believable in order for your hurdle rates for the investment to be believable. Well, now you don't quite believe it, so you begin to hedge a little bit more uncertainty around that hurdle rate than there was before, and uncertainty produces higher costs in the acquisition process. I'm using a very small slice, but that's repeated every day thousands of times. So I think losing trust in a bedrock institution is highly consequential, highly difficult, and very expensive for an economy. Does it reduce the growth rate? Yes, over time it could actually reduce the growth rate in the economy. Not to know the economy is operating at a certain level because you distrust the data means you don't know how the economy is operating. And how can you function efficiently and use your resources at their highest and best use if you really can't see the economy the way you think you should?
Nancy Podock says that today, as Trump's BLS pick prepares for the Senate confirmation process, the country sits at a crossroads. Will leadership continue to prioritize the best, most impartial data, or will it fall into a familiar trap that other countries know too well, in which numbers aren't used to learn about the economy, but to tell an approved story about it?
We really need people to get excited about the whole system, not just the firing of the BLS commissioner, but knowing that that's a keystone in a larger system that is in peril. We're going to go one way or the other at this point. I don't think there's a status quo option. I think it's either going to get very political or people are going to really strengthen the system. We've got to choose as a nation which way we're going to go.